We're going to enjoy so much hearing from Mariah Calagione.
Yes, that's right.
Rhymes with baloney. Calagione in just a minute. But first I wanted, we told you guys that we were going to have visitors, and Arnell Millhouse is the organizer of Intra-City Geeks. I've told him he's got 30 to 90 seconds, just like you guys have.
Awesome. Thank you.
Nice to see you.
Great to be here. You guys are doing some amazing work. And we've been working with the Brown community on and off for a number of years in several different capacities. So what we do with Intra-City Geeks, we started out teaching K-12 computer science, rigorous, algorithmic, computational thought provoking programs for K-12. The mayor heard about it, the Brown Daily Herald heard about it, we got some press and media, so then we expanded into something called Code Night with the Mayor. From there, the government, we did a hackathon for the city of Providence, then we did the hackathon for the governor for the state of Rhode Island. President Obama heard about us, put us on the White House website, gave us some recognition. So now we're doing adult level training for computer science, people with 0 to hero. And you know, it's been a great program.
That's a great tagline.
0 to
Zero to hero.
Right, and
Love it.
we have 3 of our developers here, 3 of our rockstar developers. Cliff has been working with me. So what we do at Career Devs, so Intra-City Geeks has spawned something called Career Devs, which teaches not only computer science, but also entrepreneurship. So we're an incubator. We've met with Liz and Jonas and Jonathan Nelson here. Not Jonathan, sorry. Danny Borshay here at the...
I was going to say, if you got to meet Jonathan Nelson, I'm clearly...
I have met him.
Okay, good for you.
So we're here, so we want to make our resources available to you guys as well and do some cross-pollination. And I think it's going to be a great opportunity to get outside the Brown bubble, see what else is happening throughout the rest of the city and the state.
Fantastic. Thank you, Arnell. All right, with no further ado, I'm going to have Mariah take the platform stage. Thank you so much for coming. We're looking forward to hearing from you.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. I got a chance to read through your synopses on the website, so you guys have some really cool stuff going on. And I will say that these kinds of programs didn't exist when we started our company 22 years ago. And take it, like, soak it in. You're going to forget it all in like 2 years when you're in the middle of everything and you don't, like, you're hoping that you can make your next payroll. But every couple months, take a couple hours and sort of refresh these concepts. Because when Liz and I were talking before on the phone before I got here, some of the concepts and ideas that you guys get to really delve into and ask yourselves about your business, first of all, they're going to change. And you're going to need to reevaluate and go from there. But it's very fortunate to even have that sort of lens to look through when you're thinking about where your business, where you want it to go and where it's going to go over the next, hopefully, long time. So my husband and I started Dogfish Head 22 years ago. I'm going to not give you all the details because I don't have time to go through 22 years of history, but also I want to make sure that we have time for you guys to ask questions later, and if something relevant comes out, we can definitely go in that direction. I will gloss over sort of where we are, who we are and what we are today, and then go back to sort of where we started and how we sort of started getting our first customers. So today we are in coastal Delaware, which is similar to Rhode Island, a very small state. We're in a rural area, but it's a beach community, beach town, seasonal, very seasonal. We have 5 different companies with then shared support functions. We have a brewery, distillery, brew pub, which is sort of our original location, restaurant with a brewery inside of it, similar to a couple you have downtown here. Then we have a seafood restaurant next door called Chesapeake and Maine, which is all focused on sustainably sourced seafood from Chesapeake region and Maine, and focuses on our cocktails rather than our beers. And then we have a 16-room hotel that we opened 2.5 years ago, where we have sort of brand fans, beer lovers come stay, but we also do a lot of education with our customers, bringing all of our wholesalers in from around the country and really let them sort of immerse themselves in the Dogfish brand for 2 to 3 days at a time and do deep education with them on our property, so that when they go back to Seattle or Texas or Missouri, wherever they're selling our beer, they know who we are and they can tell a lot more of our story, which story is hugely important to us. So we want to give them as many storytelling quivers to put into, or arrows to put into their quiver so that they can be effective on the streets when they're selling 30 brands of beer. We have about 500 coworkers this time of year. I say this time of year because I mentioned we're in a beach community, and we're in the restaurant business, so our restaurant numbers more than double in the summer just to take care of the tourism population. So we have a lot of people that come back every summer and work. We have a lot of teachers that work for us in the summer, or college students that come back. So we're not retraining every single person, but we do swell in the summer by a lot. Most of those seasonal people are at the restaurants, but we also, in all, we have about 250 people at the brewery, and about 70 of them are off-site around the country on our sales team. The rest are all based in Milton, Delaware, which is a challenge in itself when it comes to recruiting, because not everyone knows where Milton, Delaware is or wants to live in a rural beach community. But luckily, we find enough people that do. We sell, I'd say, 3 different main product lines. Beer, we sell beer in 37 states across the US. That was about 31 until this year. And then we opened recently 6 more states. Eventually, we'll probably get to 50, more as a result of the marketplace and the kind of customers that we sell to. When you think of chain stores, if we want to sell to a Publix in the Southeast, which is a grocery store chain, we need to be able to service all their stores. So if we're not in a certain market because just the volume isn't there, we still need to be there so that we can supply all their stores. So we're in 37 states. We sell our spirits only in 4 states. We've had a distillery for 12 years, and only about a year and a half ago did we pull it out of our restaurant and make a production distillery. So we're pretty much building a startup company within our brewery, and it's very different, and we've actually made a lot of mistakes in the last 2 years on that. So we're kind of reinventing and learning on that business all the time. It sounds very similar, but it's completely different go-to-market strategy and very different competitive set there in distilled spirits. And then we sell merchandise. You go to a brewery or any kind of tourism place, there's hats and t-shirts and stuff like that, which is well over $1 million a year now just in merchandise, which we never thought would happen. But we sell that in our brewery tasting room, in our restaurant. We have a little shop, and then online. That's the only thing we're allowed to sell online, because we are not allowed to sell alcohol online. There are places where you can get alcohol online, but we're not. That's just not the way we set up our business model, and we're not in that business at this point. So the bulk of our, in terms of customers, we have 5 or 6 different kinds of customers. The people who drink our beer, for the most part, are not our customers. We sell 90% of our beer and spirits product to about 80 customers across the United States. In the United States, after Prohibition, the federal government mandated there's a 3-tier distribution system. So we have to sell to a distributor, which basically is a warehousing and logistics company, that then sells to a retailer, which is a bar or a restaurant or a store where you would go in and as a consumer buy. So we don't directly touch our consumers. We actually have very little data about our consumers from a sort of macro level. We don't know necessarily all the details of who's buying what. It depends on the kind of account, which I won't get into that, but chain data, I can buy data about our chain sales, but that's only about 30% of our business versus another bigger brewery, that's like the bulk of their business. So, so that's why we're super reliant on our distributor partners to give us great information and feedback, and have a great partnership with those 80 or so wholesalers we have around the country. As I mentioned, we can do direct sales of our beer and spirits and merchandise to customers who come to visit us. So if you come to the brewery, you can buy beer or spirits to go. Or if you come to the brew pub, you can buy beer or spirits to go. And merchandise. So that's our touch point with consumers. And that's sort of where we try to get as much feedback, but it's kind of hard when you're sitting at a brew pub to get official feedback from a customer. So a lot of that is anecdotal. But we did have nearly 100,000 people come on a brewery tour last year. So we do have a lot of people that find their way to coastal Delaware and visit with us and hang out with us, and we try to sort of figure out some information from them in a non-invasive way. So we also have customers that come, they're just coming to us as a restaurant. They might not even know that we sell beer, that we make beer or spirits in the back room or down the road. They are just walking up and down the streets with their kids on their summer vacation, and they come in and have a great meal. So we also have our restaurant guests and as customers. Same with the inn. Most of those are consumers that are staying there, but like I said, in the off season, we use it as sort of a brand immersion hub for distributors. So our largest group of individual customers, like I said, are the ones that we can't talk to. They're the ones that live across the United States, in the 37 states where we do business, and buy our beer through a licensed retailer. So that's the biggest group of our customers as we see them, even though they're not really our customers. But our challenge is we still have to find ways to connect with them and make them want to go into a store and buy our product from someone else. And then finally, we have probably a fairly outsized, for our size, group of loyal, just brand enthusiasts around the world, really. We have, people, we have dabbled in a little bit of export over the years, which we've since pulled back, but we've sold our beer in, officially in the UK, in Italy a little bit, but every week we get emails from people who are holding up our bottle of beer in, I got this one, the one I got this week was from the British Virgin Islands. I got one 2 weeks ago from Singapore. So our beer is getting out there. So we have brand loyalists that are not our customers, and they're just brand fans, and they might be brewers in Scandinavia. And when they come to the US, they're gonna come to coastal Delaware to pay us a visit. So there's a big online beer community out there. And so we've spent a lot of time and resources speaking with those customers, engaging with those customers, and even though they're not officially customers, they're sort of brand fans, and to us they're super important. So a little bit about where we were when we started. First off, we started 22 years ago, so it was June 23rd, 1995, as the first brew pub in the first state. Delaware was the first state to sign the Constitution, so we get to call ourselves that. But originally we were supposed to open in Providence, Rhode Island. I was living here after I graduated. My husband moved, or my boyfriend at the time, moved up here, and he was freelancing, kind of, basically working for free at an ad agency downtown, and basically said, I'm going to be, he was walking around looking for commercial space, trying to figure out how to get a liquor license in Providence, actually, going out with realtors and had written the business plan, and everything was based right here. And about 2 or 3 months in, when he was having challenges figuring out the hoops of licensing and legal, so take advantage of the legal time, because you don't think you'll need it, but whatever, you'll need it. But there's a lot of hoops to get a liquor license. So at that time, my dad called randomly and said, oh, remember that brew pub that was about to open in Rehoboth Beach? Their financing fell through. You guys should move your plan down here. And we were like, yeah, sure. And then Sam was like, well, we're going to be the 3rd brew pub in Providence. We would be the first brewery in the entire state of Delaware. And so then there's some sort of cachet there. And he wanted to ideally be in a place that didn't have a brewery. And at that time, it was Delaware, Mississippi, very few other places, because although the beer scene had not taken off like it is now, there was 500 breweries when we opened, and now there's almost 6,000 in the United States. There was still mostly at least a brew pub in every state where it was legal at the time. So we kind of like did a, take all the Providence, Rhode Islands out of the business plan, insert Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, moved to down there and started looking for space down there. Again, very little competition in our space, a lot of restaurant competition, and we actually opened as a restaurant, but no beer or brewery competition. And we also knew the area. I was from there. We knew how the state government worked. We had Delaware, like Rhode Island, is a small state. If you don't know someone, chances are you're related to them. And so it was really helpful to know the marketplace that we were in, especially in a highly regulated industry that, like we are. We have to deal with liquor laws. We have to deal with taxation laws. On a bi-weekly basis, we pay federal excise taxes. So we have a lot of stuff that we didn't realize went with the beer industry when we were like, this is a great idea, let's do that. So anyway, that ended up being super helpful for us to be able to navigate. We've had to go through the Delaware legislature so now maybe 10 times to change laws that were on the books since Prohibition. And the most stressful was 2 weeks before we were supposed to open 22 years ago, we found out it was illegal to have a brewery in Delaware. And the legislature ended June 30th. So we basically had to go make some friends in the state capitol really quickly, which we were able to do in Delaware because, again, we knew the market. So opening as a brew pub allowed us a lot of opportunities. First of all, opening as a brewery, to make beer, you have to have ingredients, but you also have to have a lot of capital equipment. You have to have a brewing system. You have to have fermenters. You have to have packaging. If you're going to package your beer, you have to have a way to package it. Bottling line. It's very capital intensive. If you want to grow as a brewery, you're buying more equipment. It's not like you can just, create new beer out of thin air or just like copy and paste what you have. You have to, from scratch, make it and let it sit and ferment and then package it. So opening as a restaurant allowed us to go in with a smaller amount of capital needs. We had a small brewing system in the restaurant, way undersized. Our original brewing system had tanks this big. They were the size of kegs. And my husband would brew 2 to 3 times a day just to keep up, because again, we opened in June. It's a seasonal business, so we were behind the 8 ball from probably way before we opened, but definitely from when we opened. So we were able to get open because we went undersized. We had nowhere near the capital we needed, but because we were in a restaurant, we weren't shipping beer to a wholesaler and then waiting 30 days for them to pay us. We were handing a beer to you across the bar and you were paying us right there. So we had cash flow from the beginning, not so much in January, but the first 6 months we had customers who were paying us on the spot. And not only that, but we were experimenting on them and they were paying us to try our beer and tell us what they liked or didn't like about it. And if they didn't like it, we could tweak it and 3 weeks later have a new batch, maybe tweaked, and get input on that. So our R&D, our focus groups, if you will, were coming to us and paying us to try our product. They didn't like it. We knew pretty quickly that this beer wasn't that big of a hit, and it was in such small batches that we could just sort of get rid of it if we needed to, dump it down, dump it, get rid of it, and start over. And because we had, I'm gonna say we probably had 8 to 12 taps when we opened, which is like nothing now. Every place has 8 to 12 taps. But at that point, most restaurants didn't have the variety of beers that they have now. So, so if one wasn't working, we could easily get rid of that, and people had other choices. It also, brewing 3 times a day for my husband, who has very little attention span, caused him to not want to brew the same exact beer 3 times a day, every day. And we had a kitchen in the building. So within the first couple of weeks, he was walking out of the brew house into the kitchen, grabbing stuff off the shelf, saying, well, what if I put this into it? Or what if I do this? So from the beginning, We were very experimental in ingredient choice. Again, now that's not that big of a differentiator, but 22 years ago, it was almost like hearsay. People were like, you can't put fruit in beer. Like, why would you do that? That's against the traditional rules of brewing, which is water, hops, yeast, and barley. You don't mess with that. That's sort of, even the beer people were saying that it was the purists, like, we're like, ew, that dogfish, they're doing weird stuff, throwing weird stuff into beers. But that really is what gave us the opportunity to differentiate ourselves. Even though there were not as many breweries then, there still were starting to pop up. And they had started 10 years before on the West Coast, but even if Philly was a really early adopter of the local beer scene. So that was right up the road from us. And finally, because we were in a coastal community, it meant that our guests, especially in the summertime, were all visiting. They were visiting coastal Delaware from DC, Baltimore, and Philadelphia. So we had an urban audience coming to visit us and then going back. So when we decided less than 2 years in to start doing some hand packaging and distribution to urban cities, Philly was a great one because they did have a beer community there that had already started. And they knew us because they're like, oh, that's what I had at the beach. I never remember that. DC people knew Dogfish Head. They knew Rehoboth Beach because that mid-Atlantic region vacationed with us. So it was not only they knew us, but generally they had fond memories of beach vacation. So that was a benefit for us. Okay, let's see what else. Okay, so in terms of getting those customers, we had to get them through the door, right? And that was our challenge at that point, was getting people to come to us. So like I said, it was a beach community. We were a little differentiated in that we had a brewery, but Rehoboth Beach has a super strong restaurant scene. So within the 1 mile square radius of Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, there's 75 liquor licenses. That doesn't count your pizza places on the boardwalk or your funnel cake places or your french fry places. That's just sit-down restaurants, with full-service restaurants with liquor licenses. So we had a lot of competition, so we still had to get people through the door. And again, I think that's where sort of the DNA of our company as a storyteller was started. Like, we had to sort of tell people why they should come visit us. We were 4 blocks off the beach, and when we first opened, people were like, oh, that's too far away. You've had 4 restaurants in that building in the last 5 years. That's terrible. That location has bad luck. So we basically went out into the local community and started sort of doing our pitch, our 90-second pitch everywhere we went. We went to the local bookstore. We were like, oh, have you guys come down? We spent a lot of time in the local bookstore and the local record store. And we basically gave everyone that worked there these discount cards so they could come in for themselves and get really great deals. But when you are visiting an area and you go into the local stores in a tourist area, you ask the people who are working in the restaurants, in the stores that you're in, hey, where do you guys go? What do you like? What are the local places? So we really did a lot with face-to-face marketing to help recruit customers, not just once they were in our restaurant, but to get them in. We did a lot of that. We worked with the local newspapers. We sort of, we would tell anyone any awesome little tiny story to try to get coverage. PR was a big focus for us, even though we didn't really think of it as PR. But we were basically telling our story all the time and making sure that people knew that we were there and that they should come in and visit us. We had live music. Now none of this sounds that sort of interesting or different. But in our community, we just made sure that we marketed ourselves differently than our competition was doing so. And from the beer side, we didn't have the competition, but from the restaurant side, we did. So, but I mentioned we started hand bottling and hand packing and driving up to sort of a Philly, DC, Baltimore markets in the off season. And we had to get distribution for that because legally we're not allowed to sell directly to retailers. So very quickly we had to sort of, we had to change our pitching. We weren't talking to consumers anymore, we were talking to wholesalers. And beer wholesalers at that time, had a reputation for really not doing a lot in terms of they'd take your beer and then they'd deliver it if it got ordered, but they weren't necessarily focused on sales and definitely not focused on brand building. That's changed a lot in the last 22 years, but at that time it was really up to us to do a lot of the selling into the wholesale and into the retail accounts, because they just weren't set up to sell independent craft beer to a bar. They were set up to sell 10 different varieties of Bud Light in different package size, and all they had to do was fill out the form. There was very little brand building there because the big, huge breweries, they did that. That's what they're great at, right? They're great at building their brands and marketing them to the consumers. So quickly we sort of morphed where we had the restaurant side. We brought in a general manager. He was one of Sam's best friends from college, so totally we trusted him. And then we started focusing more on the beer side, which pretty quickly was about to drive us into bankruptcy. In fact, that partnership fell apart because that best friend wanted us to go bankrupt because we couldn't sell beer. We couldn't make beer and make money on the brewery side. We couldn't pay for equipment. We were buying terrible, used, awful equipment that never really worked, but that's the only equipment we could afford. So we bought it. We sort of had, one place on the bottle line, we had a baseball bat, and if you hit it the right way, the bottles would get unstuck and you wouldn't break them. So, and at that time, getting customers required, like I said, getting these wholesale customers and going into bars and talking to people and being like, please sell our beer. That's what we did. Their sales force wasn't going to be selling our beer, and we didn't have a sales force. So again, standing in stores, handing out samples, doing promotional events in bars was sort of our first way of connecting with customers, telling our story, talking about the ingredients in the bottle, why our beer was different, why we put apricots in our IPA when no one else was doing that, why chicory was a great ingredient for our coffee stout. So we were there. We were the salespeople, and you're going to have to be the salespeople, unless I'm not the salesperson. Luckily, Sam was the salesperson. But even when I was there, every weekend we were at beer festivals handing out samples. And so I became more of the salesperson than I probably would have been from a natural tendency. But that's sort of how it happened. And it was probably, we started packaging. We opened the separate brewery in 1997, started packaging and distributing to those sort of 3 major markets. And then sort of there was this bust or bubble or whatever they call it that burst in the craft beer world in 1996 to 1998, even into 2000. It was the Wall Street Journal, I think at one point said, microbrewery fad is over, and the last thing you want is your industry to be called a fad, right? You want to be that trend that continues. But so many investors had gotten into it and sort of were in it for the money, and there was a shakeout, and a lot of breweries closed at that time, which was kind of convenient because we were able to, at that point, buy up some not so terrible equipment from breweries that had gone out of business in Philly and Florida. We drove down and got some tanks from Florida. So anyway, we were able to pick up some equipment on sort of the sad story of the market for the breweries that went out of business. But so I'm going to flash forward a lot because over that time we opened the distillery and the restaurant, did all that stuff, moved again, which when you have a capital business with tanks in the ground all piped together, you don't want to be moving it around a lot because it's expensive. But we moved again into a 20,000 square foot building, which was huge. In fact, the landlord at the time said, well, it's 100,000, don't you want the whole building? We're like, no. We went from in a restaurant to a 5,000 square foot warehouse to a 20,000 square foot warehouse. And today we have 200,000 square feet of building that we're in just at the brewery alone. So yeah, we should have probably done that at the time, but it wasn't an option. But luckily, no one else took it, so we grew into it. We didn't have to move again. But at that point, as soon as we could, we bought up the property around us so that we can continue to grow there. And in fact, we underwent an expansion 4 years ago that lets us do up to 650,000 barrels of beer, which is 1.2 million kegs of beer. That's our volume that we can probably get to if we build out where we are on our current footprint. Right now we do about 270,000 barrels a year, so we can continue to grow where we are with the systems that we've put into place over the last couple of years. We'll piecemeal stuff in like fermenters as we grow. We'll add the fermenters and sort of expand the capability, but we did have to buy a brew house that could get us to 600,000 barrels and a packaging line, which are the big bolts on each end of the process. And then we can sort of scale the middle stuff. Okay, so in terms of customers, because I know that's supposed to be my focus today, we have different customers and we have different types of marketing that we have to do to those customers, different kinds of support we have to provide to those customers. And over the years, we've been good at different parts of it. The direct-to-consumer marketing that we don't even sell to for by and large, the bulk of our business, for about 18 years, that's what we were really good at. We were really good at talking to people that we weren't selling the beer to. We were hoping that they would go into the stores and buy it and pull it off the shelves, and they did. And they were, but that's where 90% of our ideas were focused, our resources went to. We have a great, rabid, like I said, loyal following. I think of all the craft breweries out there, we are number 3 in terms of social media engagement, only behind Sam Adams and New Belgium, which is Fat Tire beer, and they're like huge compared to us. We have number 1 number of Twitter followers of any craft brewery out there. So we're all about the end consumer and engaging with them through social media, through events, through marketing. But about 3 years ago, we realized we need to get our crap together on how we are as we want to be the most valuable craft beer supplier to our customers, which are wholesalers, and we're not. And we took a hard look at ourselves and we said we need to get better at doing that. We need to better serve the people that are out there selling our beer. So we actually, in the last 2 years, we've doubled the size of our sales force. We're up to about 80 people on our sales team, and we're in the tail end of doubling the size of our marketing department, which is still small compared to most of those bigger breweries, but for us, it's a lot bigger. And that was really only what put us in the position to be able to open those 7 new markets that I mentioned earlier, that we hadn't opened markets in a very long time because we knew we couldn't support them. Even though we had have and still have a really great loyal customer following, that wouldn't have been able to grow without the support of our distributors. And they need things like truck wraps and shelf tuckers and decals for cooler doors and stuff that's not as fun and exciting as some of the other consumer marketing that we get to do. But it's so valuable, and if they have that, they're gonna, so like I said earlier, there was 500 breweries when we opened. There's almost 6,000 now. Every single one of them wants their distributor's attention. Now we know the big breweries are gonna get the bulk of the distributor attention because that's where they're making their high revenue from a volume standpoint, but they're making their profit margin from craft breweries. So we wanna be among the top craft breweries that are supplying great, valuable, differentiated beers and marketing and brand loyalty to those distributors. So that's been a really big focus for us, like I said recently, because those 6,000 breweries aren't the behemoth breweries. They're not cropping up. They're all the small breweries. So that's where we have to have the attention of our distributors. And for a while, distributors were buying up every single small, and I don't mean buying the company, but buying the rights to distribute all of the small breweries. Like it was a land grab. So we would have a distributor that we've been with for 15 years in New Jersey. We were their top craft beer, but all of a sudden they had 40 other brands that they were going into stores representing, and all small brands. And it's like, that's not sustainable. So, and if you're going to keep all those 40 brands, how are we going to be at the top of that list in terms of when you walk into an account? So that's been a lot of our focus, and I think we've actually swung too far away from consumer marketing and consumer engagement right now, so we're trying to balance that back. So it's really about knowing who your customers are, how they're different, and how you have to be able to supply and support and sort of gain new customers through the different piles of customers that you have. And I know that's not the technical term, but the different types of customers. Because granted, I mean, 20 years ago, if someone had said, well, who are all your different customers? We'd be like, well, the people that drink our beer, of course. You know, that's who we want to talk to. So anyway, last thing I'll say, and I know we're going to do a workshop, but the other thing I'd say is I mentioned earlier that we were, my husband and I were both salespeople because we had to be. And I will say that he is awesome at this, like getting up and talking in front of people, going to conventions and talking to people, walking into a store and talking to people. He was in a bar in St. Louis last night. People are snapping their pictures with him and posting them on Twitter, like, oh my God, I met Sam from Dogwood. He is that guy for our company. And I am not at all. Like I like this size, like, at the most. But what I was able to do and bring to the table in terms of selling was when a customer years ago said, you guys should be on social media, like that to me, I was like, oh, what is this? Knew nothing. Like, I didn't know anything about anything. A customer set up our Twitter account, and another customer had set up a Dogfish fan page in Texas that I took over. But that to me, I'm much better at like sort of the back of the house, sales and marketing. I'm the one that's on my phone all the time talking directly with customers. I do have a woman that helps me out now, but we get so much insight from our customers about sort of, because they know we're listening and we'll talk with them and not at them. They give us great information. They ask us questions that, again, it's like our focus group of coming into the restaurant. These people have raised their hands and they want to engage with us. So we put a lot of resources into that. So I would say, when you're, you don't have to be great at every part of your business. Hopefully your partner and your teammates and your coworkers are gonna pick up the slack and run with stuff that you're not excited to run with on a daily basis. Okay, so what we're gonna do now is, I have this. Liz, did they have this question? Yeah. Yes, okay. So I'll just, this is what you're gonna do here is imagine your product, your company, your service, whatever it is ready to go. It's where you want it to be. Everything's dialed in. Every I is dotted, T is crossed, and you're gonna go out and sort of try to make your first sale. So what I'd love you guys to do is talk, and then we'll give like 5 or 10 minutes. Is that right? Okay. So how do you go about getting your first customer? And if you've already done it, how did you go about doing it? What would you change if you've already done it, like from what you've learned from having that first customer? What would you already change? And what's your approach going forward with customer acquisition? Like, how are you going to identify them, find them, and make them give you their hard-earned cash? So.
And then you're going to poll them and then react to their notion for how they acquire their first customer.
Okay, I like that. Sounds good.
All right. So this is really just an opportunity for you to think through the stuff that you're already thinking through, which is how do you go from, from the product development to actually product sales. And it's really, we've this term of beachhead market and the serviceable, obtainable market? Who do you identify as the group or customer or person or business who has the biggest hair on fire need? I'm not sure how you identify the hair on fire need in a consumer product like this, but it's sort of like it's a build it and you hope they come kind of thing.
Yeah, and people who wanted something different from their drinking experience they were looking for. I mean, we knew that that was a trend of people wanting differentiation in their...
tired of the same old thing,
yes.
kind of thing. So yeah, take a few minutes and think about how you go from, as Mariah is saying, just imagine that wonderful time when your product is actually done. And that's sometimes hard to do. You're head down, you're trying to actually do the product development piece. But now just imagine creatively that you're done. And it's packaged, it's weighed, it's, you've got everything, the regulatory's done for the medical device companies, the regulatory's out of the way, and you're gonna try to get somebody to write a check to the company. What's the approach? And then you can share it to the group, and then maybe Mariah can comment on it from her context. All right, so take a few minutes, just get a piece of paper, you can type it into your fancy computer, just sort of. And you have to be precise. It's not about, oh, I'm going to talk to, just try to be as precise as possible. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Because I mean, you guys had to be very precise. You had to actually, implement a plan.
Yes.
So, all right. So be as precise as possible.
Can I just do it? Or fine.
Okay, you guys, we're going to come back together. Mariah's just going to cold call on groups to sort of tell how they're going to get their first customer, and then just talk about it.
Okay.
So she's going to be mean and just cold call people.
How about we start right here? And I guess what I would ask for you guys to do, I did read through the synopsis, but I don't know who matches which synopsis, so maybe like not the 90-second, but the like 3-second synopsis of what your venture is, so that at least I can put it into context.
Okay, so we're Che, and we're a snack-based company that's trying to change the way we look at snacking. But I really liked what you said about your product and people looking for something different, because I think that's what is also true with our product, because there are a lot of snack alternatives out there, especially like healthy snacks, which is what we were trying to really accomplish. So trying to figure out what that want is from the customer. And in terms of getting that first customer, I think our best bet is really focusing on Brown's campus and kind of word of mouth and giving our product to some people, and then kind of getting that want for the product from other people.
Seeding the market, giving them a taste.
Yeah.
Okay.
Have to come back.
So how do you do that? How are you going to identify who you're going to?
Well,
we're going through like events and stuff, kind of doing the samples and stuff like that. Yeah.
Cool. I like that. Does Brown have a child care center on campus for staff and faculty? Because I'm thinking that healthy snacks resonates with moms, and that's who's going to be buying the bulk of snack food for families. And so maybe going to the child care center, if there is one on campus, or one in the neighborhood, and sort of connecting with some of the moms there and giving that out, because not only will they be buying in the stores, they're the ones that make the majority of buying decisions for a household, but they also like to talk to each other, and they love to know when they know about something that no one else does, and they love to tell them about it. So that might be a really good thing.
That is great.
Yeah.
You got that, guys, right?
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. How about you guys right behind?
Yeah, so it's just me. I'm
Okay.
working on predictive optics. It's an imaging system during neurosurgery to help surgeons visualize
Okay.
the brain, so better mapping for the brain, and visualize tumors and aneurysms. So for this, it's important to, number one, prove to insurance companies that this provides value for the people they're covering, so they're more willing to pay for it. After that, I'm going to go to hospital systems, the lifespan. So I'm going to go to procurement agents at Lifespan. And
What's Lifespan?
Lifespan is a healthcare system in Providence.
Okay.
Yeah, it's affiliated with Brown. So I'm going to go to them, and then Partners Healthcare in Boston, they run Massachusetts General, the Brigham, and then prove to them, so number one, say these insurance companies are willing to pay for this, they understand the value, and then prove to them that this can decrease OR time, so they save a lot of money, and number two, increase health outcomes, so their reputation as caregivers really improves. And after Lifespan Partners, after these hospital systems hopefully get on board, then more hospital systems will get to know about this, and it's really a competition between them, so more will
Between those two in particular? Between those two hospitals, or just all hospitals
just
in
all
general?
hospitals around the nation. Yeah.
So when you say you have to go to insurance companies first, they're not buying anything. You just have to get their sort of check.
Yeah,
so
so the payer is the hospital system. So I mean the direct customer is the hospital system,
Mm-hmm.
but the insurance companies will be paying for this for the device when the surgeons use it for the patients that the insurance companies cover.
So is it harder to get the insurance company approval, or the hospital, once they're on board, is it going to be harder to get the hospitals?
I think once I get the insurance companies, it'll be much easier to get to the hospital systems. That's why I think the insurance companies first just have to prove value in that this can increase patient outcomes. So there's less readmittance rates, and they have to pay less later on because of this.
So how do you get your first insurance company?
Just to go to the agents there.
I know, how are you going to do it? Like, how are you going to get in the door?
So I'm going to start with Blue Cross Blue Shield in Rhode Island. I know they have a lot of ties with Brown and medical school, so hopefully get some contacts there.
Yeah.
Get my foot in the door there, and then from that go to Lifespan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a little similar. Our wholesalers are actually buying our beer, but without them, we can't get to the end consumer. So we have to get to them. Even, we have to get through them to get to the consumer. So it's not apples to apples, but we do have that intermediary. So yeah, I mean, for us to get into a wholesaler is similar. Like you ask, okay, who knows who? If you're, once you're with one wholesaler, and for us, our easiest and first wholesaler was our local wholesaler. So I think that's the right approach, to get someone locally, figure out who's going to make the introduction, and then leverage them, because for us, we can't have more than one wholesaler in a territory. So you might need to go to 4 insurance companies in New England, or 20, I don't know. We can only have one per footprint, so they're not competitive. So I don't know if that will be a challenge. If one insurance company comes on board, do you have the similar challenge with the others, or is it that sort of is the first domino, and then
I think it's the first domino. Once one insurance company realizes the value, it's easier to, and these companies are very, very competitive, so if you can prove that they're going to save money later on, everyone wants that competitive advantage.
Yeah. And do you have, are you able to get sort of case studies or tests? Like, do you have, like, this is what how we improved one doctor's, before you even go to the insurance company, you have all that?
So there's different levels to what I'm offering. The first level is just an imaging system. So I'm going to go to these insurance companies and say, with this imaging system, doctors will just have better eyesight during surgery. The next level is actually providing visualization of tumors. So that's drawing conclusions from the imaging system. That's going to require more clinical testing and more data. But for the first level of imaging system, I think it shouldn't be as far as getting people on board and proving value. It shouldn't be as hard to prove that this can help.
Mm-hmm.
But I still would need definitely I would need more clinical testing to prove.
Yeah.
But before that, I can start with the insurance company.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna jump in, because
Yeah.
this is a little bit. We have more to talk about, but I won't bore the rest of the group. But there's one piece of your sales story that I think actually is applicable outside of the medical device realm, and that is that there's another class of stakeholders in this purchasing decision, and they're called influencers. And I suspect that there are influencers they don't write the check, they may not even use the product, but they influence the purchase decision. In your case, the influencers do actually use the product, it's the surgeons. And although they don't write the check and they're not your customer, they are deeply, deeply influential in the purchase decision. And so you've got to somehow factor that into your thinking. Even, whether it's the insurance company or whatnot, nobody's going to act without a deep commitment on the part of the influencers. Now, so I don't know, so anyway, I just wanted to get that word out. It's a purchase influencer. In a way, your end consumers are purchase influencers since they don't write the check to Dogfish. They write the check to their local retailer, but they somehow have to influence the purchasing decisions of retailers and distributors. So it's a
and without them, we probably wouldn't have gotten on the shelf in as many retailers as we did early on.
Right.
But I also know that in our town we have a small hospital, and one of the big lunchtime businesses for the restaurant community in our town is pharmaceutical reps wooing doctors by coming in and we're buying lunch for your whole office and bringing it to you. So I know that influencing of the medical community. No, that's dinner. At lunch they're coming in and buying whole spreads of lunch pizza, 25 pizzas to take to the office of the doctors. At dinner they're doing the wine and dine screen down presentation thing, but yeah, there's a lot of influencing there. You're right.
I guess to address that, the good thing is we're starting trials with the surgeons that are at the hospital.
Oh, yeah.
So they're going to be using this equipment, getting a hang of it, and kind of getting used to it and understanding how it really helps them. So because we're starting locally and doing testing at first, I think it's going to be easier to convince the hospital system, so the administrators and the procurement agents, and have the voice of those neurosurgeons who are already working with them.
Yeah. Wow.
Okay.
Very cool. Good luck. Okay. Why don't you go? Oh, did you have someone else with you? No. It was just you. Okay. Oh, he was sick, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So again, it's a bit complicated because the two different products will be probably marketed a bit differently. To start with the sensor systems, because it's a subscription system, turning beta users into paying customers and then using them for word of mouth is the plan there. Unfortunately, we have a deficit because on the team currently we don't have anyone with farming roots, and so that will be something in terms of marketing that will be either important to add going forward, or I'm working on finding people with farming roots to talk to me about the best ways to advertise. But for the full kits, we are going to have to go a more traditional advertising trade show route, with hopefully an existing showcase for farmers to visit to see an existing one in place. And then, of course, also through word of mouth, our initial market is also local. So we have some contacts and people who are willing to set up systems if we can find the resources to do so. So using a lot of our local resources is definitely the plan. Yeah.
So by resources, you mean the money to put in basically systems to showcase other.
Like your systems, it's really capital heavy.
Yep.
Have a lot of equipment to purchase. So that's the real holdup there right now. But hopefully it will be coming together.
Yeah. I do know at our big trade show for the Brewers Association this year, the first time I saw a lot of, again, I mean, there's companies that come in from Germany and set up an entire brewery and our entire packaging line for this trade show, but most of the smaller companies can't do that. And one of them had a virtual reality headset that you put on, and the line at their booth was so long just because it was using a cool technology to show people something that we've all seen. We've all stepped up on a brewing platform and walked around tanks, but everyone wanted to try their, the way they were presenting it, and it was super cool. And they were actually using our, we're buying a new R&D brewery for our facility, and they were using our R&D brewery for the presentation. So all these people were talking about our brewery only because that's what they happened to be working on at the time. But finding a different way to present at a trade show, I think, is pretty important. I mean, everyone wants free stuff. Like if you have, I'm not kidding, if you're giving away candy, people will line up for it. But maybe not at a farmer trade show, but healthy snacks. There you go, you guys. Get your snacks at her trade show booth. Yeah, so I mean, I think you're on the right path in terms of you got to find farmers to be your you know, and there's luckily so many ways to find independent farmers right now. I assume you're talking smaller farmers, not huge. So, I mean, I don't know how many farmers markets you have in Providence every week, but we have 1 billion, so I assume you do.
Different community crops, but yeah, so the farmers closer to urban centers. So
Yeah.
it's also, they're a little easier to find.
Yeah. And is there financing for this system, like for small farmers, or is it easy for them to get financing?
That's kind of up in the air right now because a lot of those programs, we don't really know what they're going to happen to them, but there have in the past been some federal financing in this area. But
Yeah. Because that might be worth spending some time researching, is how these farmers are going to pay for it. I mean, that's how the auto companies did it, right? They all have their own financing arms because people aren't going to walk in and pay 30, 40 grand for a car out of their pocket. So they're, you know, GE, the same thing, like they became financing company because they needed to help their customers finance the purchase of their initial, you know, product. So, or at least partnering or finding out how that works.
thank you.
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Okay, right here, how about we have a plaid shirt?
I was hoping you were going to comment on my sticker.
I love your sticker.
Big fan.
Look, I got one too.
So for local providers in the gig economy, Pangea is bringing together the tools needed to connect, negotiate, transact, and establish a reputation in the form of a mobile application. For buyers, our platform likewise makes it possible to discover what local providers have to offer. In the face of automation, job displacement, and the increasing lack of face-to-face interaction, we are enabling self-employment, inspiring entrepreneurship, and encouraging local connection that goes beyond the transaction.
Did you say gig economy?
I did.
Okay, because I didn't get that when you first said it, but once you started talking, I got it. I don't know.
Okay, I tend to slow my words.
Yeah. So, but okay. So is that the one that on the website talks about your side hustle?
Yeah.
Okay, that I would have. Yeah, I don't know. Gig, you just flew over it so quick. It's such a short word.
Sure.
That I would just say maybe either figure out a longer word or I don't know. So, okay. So how are you getting your first customers?
So we're doing it face-to-face marketing. So we are running a campus ambassador program where we're going to go door knocking. We're starting at universities. So we're going to go dorm to dorm, room to room, and basically invite people to check out our open marketplace. And they'll be inspired to come on as providers, and then the marketing strategy is that they are incentivized to go and self-market and onboard users to buy their services.
So so college students are going to go get other people who have services they want to provide, or that they're marketing their own services?
They're marketing their own services.
Okay. So it's kind of like a long time ago, the big deal was like all these painters got in the summer would get college kids to be their painters, and they'd like staff up, and all over campuses you saw, you know, paint houses for the summer. So that was their approach to get labor was, you know, that's when everyone wants to paint. So similar to that. But I guess my question as an end consumer, I want to make sure that you know, is there a certain niche of services that your providers are providing?
So we want it to be open as possible. Anything that's legal, we want to enable. We are focusing in on several categories. For instance, we think knowledge exchange is going to be huge. So I guarantee that everyone in this room has some skill that people would want to learn. So for me, I know how to sail, and I can give 7 lessons. Or John here knows how to play ukulele. So college students all have some cool skills that I've realized that they can offer. So the knowledge exchange is huge. For instance, Johnson & Wales, down the street, one of the top culinary schools in the country. Whenever I mention the fact that wouldn't it be great to hire a Johnson & Wales student to come cook for you for a night or teach you how to scramble an egg, as an example, people go nuts. So knowledge exchange is one of those things that we think would be huge. It's an abstract, semi-large category, but it is more focused than plumbing or house.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would say is maybe pick, like you said, certain skill sets maybe to start where at least when you're marketing them, so that you're not, because you can easily get super scattered very quickly, right? Like you said, everyone has something to do, but if you go onto the website and there's one person that can do one person in every single category, and there's no depth of choice for the consumer, like ideally you want to be able to say, okay, there's 7 people that do sailing. So I kind of feel like I'm going to find one that's a good fit for me. So maybe make sure you have that depth in at least the categories that you're going to market hard. And I think the Johnson & Wales one is a great one. You know, like whether it's a private chef in your home for the night, or cooking class, or I need you to make some, I'm supposed to bring 20 dozen cupcakes to my kid's school. Can you make them for me? Like, I mean, so it looks homemade, like not that I bought them at the bakery. I mean, yeah, there's lots of different ways to, I would think, to utilize something like that. So I think
create depth within certain niche.
Yeah, well, at least the ones you're going to market around. Like you're going to have to pick. You can't market your website, your platform to everyone, right? So you're going to market it to certain, I would think, certain categories harder than others. And then watch where you're getting depth organically. Because if you're getting all these people that sign up to do this one kind of thing, then you don't have to work hard to create the depth that's already being created. So while you're sort of trying to intentionally create the depth in certain areas, just be aware of where it's already happening and how you can leverage that. So, yeah. Keep going.
One more, and then we'll do Q&A.
Okay. How about in the back with the striped sweater?
So we are Alethea. We are coming up with a biotechnology solution to menstrual cramps. Because we've kind of had enough of it. We think that technology is at a point where we can do that. So for our first customer-wise, we have kind of identified that we need to have a huge social media presence, just because there's a lot of kind of taboos and shyness that needs to get broken down before we can really come to the scene. And I think a big part of that is our first product line is in connection with the menstrual cup. So kind of educating women on what that is and showing how to use it. There are platforms that are out there currently, and we want to kind of join up with them. A big one is YouTubers. They'll review a lot of menstrual cups, they'll talk about it. One of them is Jess Kelly. She's a really awesome woman, and her videos get anywhere between 20,000 to like 800,000 views. So that'd be a really good place to start, to kind of introduce it, and then move up into kind of the BuzzFeed world. There's Ladylike that also has done a review on menstrual cups, and that would be a really huge audience to reach. And then once we kind of have, the presence out there in social media that people are actually talking about it, getting it on the shelves of CVS would be a lot easier, because we could go into the meeting saying, hey, we have this huge following of women that have heard about us, that are able to buy the product and want to, and so getting it on the shelves of CVS would be a really easy way to make a good blanket of the US at least.
Right.
And so that's kind of the first step.
Yeah. So you're going to do a lot of PR at the beginning, right? Like relationship.
Instagram, a lot of just kind of. We don't want our product to be overly feminine, because looking at some of the menstrual cups, one of them is Diva Cup, and kind of their catchphrase is like, so everyone can feel like a diva. And while that's cute and all, I think that the industry has been over feminized, and a really big success is some of those companies that have kind of pulled back on that. And I think that's what we kind of want to go into it as well, being more young and hip and a little bit more giving you freedom versus giving you a flower.
Yeah. So, I mean, I know so just from experience, the folks that have the huge social media followings at this point are very expensive, right? I mean, I got an email from the Instagram account Fuck Jerry the other day, and he sent me his deck of what it costs, and I was like, are you kidding me? Like, yes, you have a lot of people, but that's a lot of money. So how much does it cost, and is that something you can afford to go after someone like that has that kind of following?
I haven't, we haven't looked at the pricing, but with YouTubers, I think there's like tiers, and a lot of the reviewers, they just get free products, and that's kind of and there's probably some costs as well, but like their main thing is just a free product. And there's really high YouTubers, kind of like the Jenna Marbles and Superwoman of the YouTube, which we're not going to touch. But if we start off small enough, I think that we could just get away with like, here's a free sample of 8 patches or something. Like, would you review it? Slowly.
And I would also encourage you to, instead of setting the bar at CVS, which the minute you can't supply them, you're out, maybe try some independent stores first and really get your supply chain really dialed in, because the last thing you want to do is get a placement in a bigger, a CVS or a Target, and then not be able to keep up with the demand.
Yeah, and we're also thinking that we could do some online sales because it would be like an over-the-counter type of medication.
Oh, yeah.
We don't know the implications there, but we could do where if we're advertising so much on social media anyway, they go to our website, they can buy it, and then once we're kind of like down pat there, then go into actual. So I think brick and mortar stores are going less and less.
Right. Yeah, especially for stuff like that. I mean, like I don't buy any like sort of home paper products, even dog food. Like I get all that delivered. Like I don't want to.
Makes it easier.
Yeah. So yeah, and we haven't obviously sold through Amazon, but do they take such a big piece that it's not worth it?
We're still in the R&D space and
Yeah.
everything else. So we have regulatory, so it'll be a couple of years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you have regulatory even though you're over the counter?
Just because tampons are actually a medical device as well. So if we're putting anything in the vagina, which is a very sensitive tissue, you have to get a lot of testing just to make sure that you're not going to really
Yeah,
screw up
that makes sense.
reproductive organ.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good thing. So, yeah. Okay, I like that. But I would check on someone like Amazon or someone that regionally there might be other companies that it might not be worth it. You have to run the numbers and see if the percent that they're going to take makes it not viable for you to grow, because you don't want to be then dependent on someone like that, because then they can change the formula and put you out of business. But it might be a way, but it might not be.
Yeah, we'll look into that.
Great. Let's transition to Q&A, and I'm going to ask the first one just so that you guys can sort of get back into remember some of the things that you talked about, if that's okay.
Yeah.
You talked about that you're in 6 businesses or something like that, and it struck me that you committed a cardinal sin of entrepreneurship. Which is focus.
Yeah.
And people, instructors of entrepreneurship and investors who are evaluating a prospective investment, they want to see focus on the part of the entrepreneur. And if you're not focused like a laser beam on, don't try to do 3 things poorly, do 1 thing well, and all this kind of stuff. So I wonder if you could talk about the rationale, and it sounded like you even kind of had pulled back on a couple of ideas. So talk about focus. Was it smart for Dogfish to open a hotel? Was it smart to go into T-shirts? And just how do you rationalize what appeared to be a loss of focus?
Yes, lack of focus is a big challenge for us, and it has been for a long time. But it's also let us differentiate in a market that is, for a long time, it was too focused. It was all light lagers. And then sort of our industry kind of exploded. And I think last year, between our restaurant and our brewery, we put out 74 different branded beers. I mean, that's a lack of focus, right? Now, 40 of those were through our brew pub. So it allowed us to market the innovative ideas, the interesting beers that come and go, because as much as consumers, and this is just beer, but as much as consumers want consistency, every time you buy our beer, you want it to taste like you remember, right? They also want us to see us innovating all the time. The craft beer industry is all about innovation and sort of bucking the trends of the mass consolidation of all the hundreds of breweries that were in the United States before Prohibition to like 3 breweries, and then it's sort of gone back to now thousands of breweries. So what we've had to do from the beer side, and this is, I'll get to the other business in a second, but just from the beer side, we lacked focus. Our distributors, like I said, they might have 30 or 40 brands. They don't want 30 or 40 more just from us. Like there's, in our industry right now, it's SKU proliferation is the big buzzword. How can 5,000 breweries each have 20 on the 20 different beer styles and expect distributors to take them and sell them well? So what we've done is we basically prioritized our beer styles. We have year-round beers, seasonal beers, and then occasional beers. And we made it so that we had, for 2 years ago, we had 5 beers that were year-round beers. And we made it super clear to our distributors that that was the focus. You're going to get the seasonal, so you have excitement. You're going to get the one-off beers. We have a beer that we release twice a year, and when we release it, we can't even keep up with it. But we're only going to release it twice a year. So we sort of set the table for them and gave them the priorities for beer. Taking it outside of beer, again, the 2 restaurants, the hotel, the distillery are all very local still. We're not going to market our restaurant to someone who lives in Providence. Unless they happen to be in coastal Delaware, they're not going to drive 7 hours to come to our restaurant. So it's a smaller area, and it's less of a commitment from a customer. It's just one meal. It's a lunch or a dinner. Oh, it does?
It chews up management time.
Mm-hmm. And we talked about 6 years about closing our restaurant. Maybe we should just close, because the other thing about restaurants is it's high turnover, high drama amongst your coworker. I mean, there's a lot of drama in restaurants on a daily basis, and a very transient workforce. So and hard to recruit. I mean, we're up at Johnson & Wales twice a year recruiting. Yeah, we talked about, and what we did instead was we brought in a VP of hospitality, and our VP of hospitality, and we couldn't have done that 10 years ago, but our VP of hospitality now works with our restaurant, our 2 restaurants, our tasting room at the brewery, and the hotel. And he oversees that whole world, works with those managers of each individual business. Each business has its own manager. And then he works with the sort of executive level team, if that's sort of what we would call ourselves, to bring sort of the bigger issues, like what do we want our restaurants to be? What's the bigger brand stuff? He sort of brings that to the table, or if we're going to make a change, like we added the restaurant 2 years ago. We only did that because the restaurant next door to us was for sale, and we didn't want someone else sort of right next door, because we have an hour wait to get in. So we were like, well, rather than make people wait outside for an hour, why don't we open this restaurant? We did it with a different concept, which we're not sure was the best idea. But we're only a year in, so we're kind of waiting to see, and we're tweaking all the time. But yeah, building up your internal resources.
Good or bad? The sort of scatter, I don't need to be
I think it's good for our brand.
It's good for the brand.
From the consumer side.
Yeah.
But it takes a lot of internal discipline to make sure that you know what your priorities are. We only wrote a strategic plan for our company 2 years ago. Yeah. So we didn't have mission statement. We didn't have, we had de facto, this is our mission statement. But it didn't mean anything. So we've spent a lot of time the last 2 years with our sort of leadership team focused on priorities and strategies from where we go for now.
Okay, great.
Yes?
And you said that you get people who come in to stay at the hotel for the beer enthusiasts and stuff like that? So that's a way of getting brand loyalty as well.
Oh, yeah.
People that it's almost like the tourism for...
Exactly. Yeah, we work, I mean, since we started as a restaurant, sort of my role in Dogfish, in terms, always been, first of all, I'm one of the few people at the top of our company that is from Delaware. Most of our leaders have relocated to work with us. So I'm super passionate about tourism, community, philanthropy for our company. So we've always been very plugged into the local tourism, Delaware tourism, Southern Delaware tourism, all the local chambers of commerce. So tourism has always been part of us. And so we mostly market to the Mid-Atlantic region, sort of like a 2 or 3 hour drive. But we've had people from all over the U.S. and a couple countries come stay there. But again, we can leverage the wider audience we have with the beer to talk about the hotel, but we have to really be intentional about not talking about too much, because most people can never come, right? They're not going to come to Lewis, Delaware to stay in our hotel, but we want them to know that we have it, because it's kind of a cool story, and it makes people go, wait a minute, what? They ask the question.
It's almost like you should have one of those, like a famous YouTuber come and do like a video series on staying at the hotel and
Yeah.
the experiences.
And I mean, we do have travel writers come in and stay. We work with the state of Delaware Tourism, who brings FAM tours, which are familiarization tours that all, you know, I'm sure the Providence Tourism Department does the same thing. But so those are great. If we can get other people to talk about our hotel or our beer. I mean, we had an amazing article in USA Today last week. I mean, that to us, like, we spent 2 years developing a new beer that we launched, and it's like on a tear right now. And for us to get USA Today to write a huge article about it and then get picked up by all their subsidiaries was worth the hundreds of hours we spent sort of creating and pitching that story. And that's something we've done from the beginning in terms of really focus on PR, probably too much focus on PR and consumer marketing than actual production in the beginning. But yeah, it's hard to let go of that. Like once we have that, you know, like we definitely spend outsized resources, internal resources on that. Yeah.
So I think the real question on everybody's mind is if you brought us free samples.
Didn't I say that? I was like, wouldn't it be cool if I could? And then I got silence. I'm like, I guess that's not appropriate.
So you mentioned that like with opening up a brewery, there are very high startup costs, and we're kind of in a similar position. We're Crosscheck, so a content validation platform. So while you're browsing the internet, you can essentially see is what you're reading verified by other sources.
Very timely.
We're also marketing towards journalists too.
Cool.
But the costs for our we're doing a lot of stuff in our back end and our server, and it's probably going to cost us over $5,000, $6,000 per month. So, but I'm sure the cost for a brewery would be even higher to open. So how did you go about like acquiring the funds for convincing investors basically that our idea or this new beer we're creating is good enough that it's worth investing into before you actually have a product?
Well, so when we first opened, we raised $120,000 and then got a traditional bank loan for $120,000. The $120,000 came from my father-in-law, like 10, I'm not going to remember the exact numbers, but basically 3 people he knew. Granted, $120,000 was much more manageable then because we weren't opening a brewery at that time. We were opening a restaurant with a really tiny brewery that literally is the size of this table. Like we went in with undersized equipment and not enough cash, except that we were in a cash business, so that helped. So a small investment matched by traditional bank loans, and then over the next initial couple of years, we refinanced with the bank. We raised a second round of friendly family friend money from different people that we knew but at that point we were open, so we had a place for them to come and see and to experience. And so that was a little bit easier, but as soon as we got into the second location, which was just the brewery and all capital intense and not a cash business, that's when we were like, okay, we don't really have, Sam and I, we didn't cash our paychecks. And that was 3 or 4 years in. In the first 2 years, we had cash flow. It wasn't until we got into the secondary brewery business rather than the restaurant business that we really had a lot of cash crunch and a lot more challenges that way. We had our biggest supplier was our grain supplier, and it was Mark from LD Carlson Grain Company, and he'd call every week wondering how much money we were going to send him that week, and I had like 10 different voices. I'd be like, hi, this is Doug. Oh no, she's not here. Click. I mean, at one point, like I was like, oh, my phone. Yes, it was before. Yeah. I think I spilled something on the phone. Sorry, but yeah. So we dodged creditors, like all that fun stuff.
So I don't mean to get like too much into just financial details, but like let's say you make a new company and you take out. I'm not familiar with the process. How are you eligible to take out a loan from the bank? Is it based off the company's history or your own personal credit history? And we're students, so I don't think a bank would finance like any sort of significant loan, even though like my credit history is not. I mean, it's not really that great. Well, it hasn't really started.
Don't mess up your credit history.
It's just like 1 year
Yeah,
old, so
yeah.
they're not going to be willing to throw it.
Right.
But assuming they did and you defaulted on that loan, would the company would it affect your personal credit history? Or
Well, for us, for 10 years, we personally were liable for our bank debt.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, but when we started, I mean, between the two of us, we owned a car, we rented, we had no kids, like we had nothing to lose. Like really, we owned nothing. Like we didn't own a house, we didn't own anything. So it wasn't like we had anything on the line, right? So, but for 10 years, one of the biggest things that we did was when we did sign the lease for the restaurant, one of our investors said, make sure you get an option to buy the building at 5 years. And so we were like, yeah, right, 5 years, we're not gonna buy a building. And we did, we bought the building when it came up. And you know, all that rent for the first 5 years went to that. But yeah, I mean, that building was sort of on the hook for the bigger brewery debt long past when it probably, well, what I would have liked it to be, but yeah, it was on there. I mean, only like, I want to say like 7 years ago did we get our personal, our personal guarantees off of our company debt. Yes.
So you talk a lot about cash flow. So I'm wondering, what would be your advice for like a hardware company, like how to manage the cash flow when you first start out the company?
First of all, get someone on board who understands it, because we didn't know anything about financing and cash flow and all that stuff. And I would say, so we started in '95. In 2002 is when we first hired, like, we had someone who came in and did our books, like from an accounting standpoint, and payroll, although I was doing payroll for a long time, and that's no fun because there's so much, you know, they tell you, it's terrifying to be in charge of payroll because you know you're going to make mistakes and like it's someone's paycheck, right? But both times I went into labor with my kids, I was like, please don't let it be on a payroll Tuesday, because there was no one else at our company who could do payroll. So I lucked out both times, by the way. But so I would say whether or not it's a employee, but it could be an advisor or someone to help, so that you can go to them and talk about the stuff that isn't in your wheelhouse. For us, finance and all the sort of the money side was not in either of our wheelhouses. We have the same accountant. Now our business accounting, we just had to switch to a top company just because we'd outgrown his firm, but we have had the same accountant since the day we started, and he now sits on our board because he's such a trusted, valuable member of our team. And so, I mean, we pay him for his services, but he's just like, invaluable to us in terms of over the years before we could really pay him what he probably should have been paid for his services. Like, he was still, a great guy at a small accounting firm, but he just understood and how to break it down to us. So even though we didn't have it, we found people around us that we could sort of pick their brains and, help fill in the gaps. Yeah.
So, great job. Congratulations on all your success.
Thank you.
And I was looking at your media, press, fan base, the official beer of, is it Delaware?
Well, we're the biggest craft brewery in Delaware.
So I was reading an article as well, like it says like the official beer of every state.
Oh yes,
Yeah,
yes,
so
that
just
was the other day.
Your engagement is amazing, and
Thank
so
you.
But looking at your growth, would you say when did your growth migrate from being linear to exponential? It looks like you're experiencing some exponential growth right now. And what is the revenue mix by business unit, since you do have so many business units? And yeah, those are first two.
Okay. So in terms of growth, it was like this, and then like this, and then like this, and then like this, and now it's like this. But I mean, it's changed over, I mean, once we got through like the early 2000s, we couldn't keep up with our growth. We were growing 40–50% a year, and we intentionally pulled out of 4 states. We pulled out of all of our international here and there markets that we were doing business in. We pulled out of Canada, the UK, because we knew we couldn't keep up. We were out of stocking our distributors. We weren't reliable. So we intentionally pulled back to like a modest 20% growth.
Yeah. And what were the strategic levers behind that contributed to these growth spurts?
I think a lot of it was marketplace. I mean, the market for craft beer in the United States just started booming, and we were right there in it. Like, we had been in it. We had gone through that early shakeout, so we were poised to, we had credibility from a liquid standpoint. People liked our beer. We were super focused on quality. We have an awesome QA lab that we probably put in earlier than most breweries do, so we knew we were putting out consistent quality beer. It was differentiated with our ingredients, and we were really good at telling that story at the right time. I mean, a lot of it's luck and timing, right? Yeah, but so we were growing like that. We pulled back. All these other breweries started proliferating, and that's when we started focusing, like, okay, let's take this time to focus on our internal stuff, get our plant and property ready to grow, get our people. We were outgrowing at 45%, we were outgrowing our people, our equipment, and our processes way too fast. We couldn't keep up. And we knew that. We had people like at our company at that point that were more operationally focused and smart at that. So then all of a sudden last year we didn't grow at all. So zero growth. Again, it's the tail end of us getting ourselves organized to be poised to grow, but the beer industry is not growing. The beer industry in the United States is actually declining slightly. The big breweries are declining more than slightly. Craft breweries are sort of propping it up, but what's happening right now is all, like Anheuser-Busch and Miller Coors are buying up craft breweries and marketing them as craft breweries. So our competition now are these former peers that are now weapons being used against us in the marketplace. Like ABI can roll into a bar and say, you don't need those 4 independent craft beers because I own Goose Island, I own Elysian, I own Blue Point. I can make a craft beer segment for you. You know, so the marketplace is changing, but we're growing. Right this year, we're having great growth. We rolled out cans last year, which we were late to the game on. And we, again, big capital investment, and we were like, our beer is, in the craft segment, we are premium. We're at the top of the pyramid in terms of pricing. So we were like, cans don't fit with us. But they did, and this year, so much of our growth is coming from our canned beers, 2 of which are new, and 1 of which is our flagship beer that we've sold for 10 years.
One more follow-up,
Yeah.
2 parts. In the beginning, what was the epiphany point that had you transition from a restaurant primary business to the brewery? And what do you see over the next, since you just did your strategic plan, what is coming down the pipe 2 to 5 years from now?
I think we mostly decided to transition from the brewery because we didn't have space in the restaurant to grow. We're in a downtown beach community, and properties, commercial properties are, millions of dollars. So we couldn't expand there. We were not in. So where we are now is an industrial zoned area. So we had to move out if we wanted to get any packaging equipment in there or storage. So that wasn't an option. So that sort of drove us to open a second location there for that side of our business. And then, what was the second part?
Strategic.
Oh, strategic. So we're our huge strategy priority is keeping our pricing. We're one of the top. We're probably the last top 50 brewery that does no discounting. We don't do volume discount. Costco is buying our beer at the same price that anyone else, the mom and pop down the street is. Now, sometimes our wholesalers will do discount programs, but we're not participating in them. So for us, holding price is super important. We are probably the most profitable beer that a distributor can carry. They're not going to get the volume from us, but the profit margin goes, and that's at the distributor level and the retailer level. All of our peers have started discounting, some because they've been bought, like Ballast Point used to be right there with us, and then Constellation Corona bought them, so they're now discounting their beer to, in the marketplace. Stone Brewery out of San Diego was right there with us, and they've started a little bit of it, but it's getting super competitive out there, so holding price, but we can only do that if we're great quality, well differentiated, and we're a valuable supplier to our wholesalers. So making sure that we retain that and consumer pull. So just those little things. Yeah, yeah.
Hi,
Hello.
my question is about social media. So how did you grow your social media to the volume that it is right now?
Well, we started early-ish in terms of craft beer and social media. We were willing to sort of expand where we should expand. Like when Instagram rolled out, we hopped right on Snapchat, which we since abandoned because it wasn't a good fit just for us at the time. But so I think that and spending a lot of time on it. I mean, most.
How did you create like your brand voice and the content?
Well, the brand voice was really just an extension of the brand voice that we have had since we started. The way we write on our menus, the way we write in our press releases, it's all been the same because it was all us doing it. A funny story though is, I was public policy major here, concentrator here, and I studied media in the public policy and worked at WPRI in Providence here for the my senior year I worked there the whole year, and then I lived here a year after that and worked there. While I was working there writing news, or learning how to write news, because I wasn't allowed to write news at that point, but they launched a new 5 o'clock newscast, which was new for the news industry at the time because it was more sensational and all about conversational writing. So it was not like, da 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 happened in Cranston last night. It was like, oh my God, look at this piece of video. So I worked on that show, and from that, I learned how to write differently than I had written before. So I was able to, when I came on, even before I came on full time with Dogfish, because I did work for the first 3 years, I had a job in a news station down in Delaware so that we could have, a paycheck and stuff like that. But I had already learned how to, and not by design, just by default. We really knew that we wanted to have our company have a voice, and it needed to be conversational and approachable, and so that developed before social media, but it just it made sense for social media. We didn't really think about our voice; it just was our voice. And then when we hired a woman who is now helping me with social media, the reason we hired her, she did an internship with us for the summer, and she could write in our voice. She got it, she knew it. After that summer, she went back to school, graduated in December, and then we hired her full time. And so now between the two of us, we're writing the majority of the social posts, and that voice, that's what we're looking for when we're looking for people to help us with any kind of writing, whether it's PR or even internal to our distributors, we're writing in that same voice, conversational tone, and even video. Like we have a full-time video person on our marketing team, and he's the second one because the last one moved away. But our directive to him is don't make it too slick. It can't look corporate. It has to look like us. It has to have that look and feel, and it's hard to describe it, but it's almost like our voice, but it's video as well. So I think having that specific voice and spending a lot of time on it and making sure to not only to be broadcasting out to people what you want them to know, but really taking the time to engage with them and answer questions when they come in, all that stuff. So it's a time suck, but a good one.
There may be other questions. I'm going to let you stop because we've been at it for a long time. Make it look easy, but can we thank her?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mariah.
That was fun.
Are you going to be able to stay for lunch for a few minutes?
Yeah.
So if you didn't get to ask a question or if you wanted to talk about something specific, then by all means do that. So we're going to flip the room and serve lunch. And thank you again for sharing. So many. It's so interesting to hear that the same kinds of words keep popping up. Product differentiation and focus and all of that kind of stuff. It's just really interesting to hear it. So great. All right. Thank you guys.